And let's generate our motivation and think that we will listen and discuss and share together today so that we can learn from the Buddha's teachings and learn from each other so that we can release misconceptions and disturbing emotions in our mind and generate our good qualities. And let's do that so that we can make a positive contribution to the well-being of the world, actually to the well-being of the universe. And so let's have that quite large perspective. And even though we're doing just 1 hour, spending just a few hours together, still by the force of a very expansive motivation like that, it has a very powerful impact on our mind. So take a moment and cultivate that loving, compassionate, altruistic intention. So last month we read the chapter about the motivation because it was the first chapter in the book, and so as we always do with a new activity like we just did, we cultivate our motivation. So now we're actually starting the book, and the book is basically a book about compassion and how to generate it, what it is, how to use it in your life, and so on. So the first chapter, actually the second chapter, the first one was on motivation, is called What is Compassion and Why Do We Need It? Okay, so I'll read from it and then I'll stop and make comments from time to time. So definitions of compassion, whether drawn from the dictionary or the Dalai Lama, generally involve 2 components. Okay, one is the sensitivity to suffering, and second, the motivation to help alleviate it. Okay, so, or to put it more concisely, it's the wish that living beings be free from suffering and its causes. Okay. So that actually brings up a whole other topic of what is suffering, but we won't get into all the details of that right now. I think we have some idea of it from our lives already. Okay. So the sensitivity to suffering, involves openness to being moved in the face of pain and suffering. We allow ourselves to bear witness to the difficulties that we and others face and to be touched by this suffering. This experience of being moved by suffering gives rise to the second component, the motivation to help make things better. Okay? So compassion is this sensitivity to suffering, but we do not take it to the point of personal distress, where we get distressed and bummed out and depressed and discouraged because we see suffering and misery. Okay, this is very, very important, because if we go to, if our sensitivity means that we start getting really emotionally involved, and in the sense of it, of feeling, well, it's just too overwhelming, there's just too much suffering, what can I do? And so then wanting to escape from it. That's not compassion. Okay? That's what we call personal distress. Compassion itself is always upbeat. You say, what? How can you be sensitive to suffering and be upbeat? You've got to be nuts. Well, actually, if you understand that suffering has causes and that the causes can be eliminated, then you feel upbeat. That doesn't mean all the causes are going to be eliminated in 5 minutes or 5 years. Okay? But it means that suffering doesn't have to be a given. It's something that comes about due to causes and conditions. And if you change the causes and conditions, then the suffering itself has to change. Okay? Also, when we have suffering, a lot of our suffering is mental. How many of you have had more physical suffering in your life than mental? How many of you have had more mental suffering in your life? Amazing, isn't it? Yeah? We're a country of mental suffering. Yeah? And that suffering especially, we can see is conditioned, is influenced, by the way we describe a situation to ourselves. So our mental suffering there may be a component that's due to something that happened in the environment or something we experienced. But, we have that initial suffering coming from outside. But then how we respond to that suffering is the source of a lot of our misery. Okay? So somebody could cheat me, and I could say, well, part of it was because I wasn't very alert. I gave somebody more trust than they could bear. And, it's over. It's done with. I learned from the situation, finished. Or I could say, they cheated me. Oh, no. How could somebody do this? And then make a big story, get really upset, get so angry, want to retaliate, want to get even, want to, deprecate that person and humiliate them. Okay, that response is coming completely from our own mind because we're interpreting the thing as a personal affront. And that interpretation causes anger and resentment and belligerence, and those emotions bring along suffering, don't they? Nobody's happy when you have angry emotions floating through your mind. Or not floating, they're raging, they're burning, But nobody's happy then. But it a lot of that kind of mental pain comes from how we interpret the event. Because with everything that happens to us, there's many different ways to think of it. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that the Buddha really specialized in, is showing us different ways to think about situations. Because clearly our old way of thinking, this is a personal attack on me. That old way of thinking produces a lot of misery. Okay. His Holiness the Dalai Lama frequently says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Okay, so you want the one cure-all for everything? Here it is. It doesn't come in pill form. But it's free, so the pharmaceutical companies can't overcharge you. Okay, it's something that you create in your own mind. Why do His Holiness and so many others feel that this particular virtue is worth cultivating? Okay. Life can be difficult, and we're all in it together. Even if we are born into an advanced position with parents who love us and care for us, an abundance of food, comfortable shelter, and access to education and medical care, each of us will still have to deal with great difficulty in our lives. True or not true? True. Can money prevent all your difficulties in life? Forget it. Okay. All of us face aging, sickness, and death. And you can't pay your way out of those three. They're going to happen. We will all lose people we love. Sometimes we will do our best and not succeed. Most of us will have our hearts broken, if not once, then several times. True or not true? Yeah. We have expectations, and it doesn't happen that way. Our heart gets broken. We will sometimes feel other painful emotions, fear, sadness, anger, or anxiety. This is the pain that comes with being human. It's the price of admission. Added to this is the fact that many of us are born into situations that are far more difficult than others. Abusive or neglectful home environments, extreme poverty, and cultural contexts that systematically advantage some people while disadvantaging others. Life is challenging, and the playing field is anything but level. True, isn't it? Yeah. On this unlevel playing field, do you feel you have an advantage or a disadvantage compared to other living beings? Yeah. How many people say disadvantage? How many people say advantage? Yeah. So, on this uneven playing field, we have an advantage. And yet, those things that just got listed happen to us too. Yeah. So if we really open our eyes, we may have an advantage, but we're still in the same boat with everybody else. Yeah. And the boat is going towards aging, sickness, death, not getting what we want, failing, all these kinds of things. Yeah. It's just part of our human experience. In the face of all this pain and hardship, compassion is the only response that makes sense. You might say, the only response that makes sense? Come on. I can have other responses. Well, it says that too. Sure, we could do lots of other things. We could become upset, look for people to blame, and get mad at them. That's another alternative. How many of us usually take that when we have suffering? Not all of your hands are going up? Yeah? That's what usually happens, isn't it? We get angry, we blame somebody else. Yeah? Or another one is we get mad at ourselves. Yeah? Okay. We could simply close our eyes to the things we don't like, pushing away painful feelings or numbing them with drugs or alcohol. That's another alternative. Yeah. And it's not just drugs and alcohol that we use to numb ourselves. Shopping is a socially acceptable addiction. It's good for the economy, but it's one of the things we do when we feel down, is we go get something new. Yeah? Even if it has to be a new box of tissue, but it's a pretty box of tissue, better than our old ones. Okay, or we get ourselves some other nice thing. Okay, we could look the other way when confronted with the suffering of others, or even blame them for their struggles. We do a lot of that, don't we? We blame the victim. Yeah? You were raped? Why were you there when this person came along? Yeah? As if you have no right to be operating, going where you go, and it's your fault if something happens to you. Not the fault of the perpetrator, or not the responsibility of the perpetrator. Yeah? We often blame the victim. Or even the person's not a victim yet, we blame them because they're different than us. Yeah? We can think of so many reasons why we are innocent. And it's always somebody else's fault. And where does that get us? Yeah? Where does it get us? Yeah? It doesn't stop the pain. In fact, many times it makes it worse, because when we say other beings are the cause of my emotions, or this situation is the cause of my emotions, what we do is we say, I have no agency. I am helpless. I have no power to change, because it's caused by outside. And I can't control outside. So it's not going to change until the outside situation changes. Yeah? When is the outside situation going to change? Yeah? So something may have come to us, a bad situation from outside, and we may have experienced some pain and misery. But then after that, we have a choice, because we're still suffering. After the initial situation is over, we're still suffering. Yeah. Like our kiddies, they suffer. When the situation stops, they forget about it. Yeah. We hold on to it. Yeah. And our memory functions much better. Yeah. And we hold on to it. And then that holding on to it causes us suffering. But if we continue to say it has nothing to do with me, it's coming from outside, then we make ourselves powerless. Yeah. And so I think the real thing in the confront of our suffering is to look at how our mind is interpreting things. Yeah. Look at, how we, through our interpretations, through our habitual emotional responses, wind up creating a lot of misery for ourselves. Because the thing is, as long as it's somebody else's fault, what can I do? Yeah? I can't do anything. I can't undo the past. Past already happened, it's over with. Yeah. So it isn't, I don't think it's really the past that is the problem. I think it's our present way of viewing the past that becomes the problem. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be, because that's the only thing we can ever change is the present. We cannot change the past. but we can change our present way of viewing something that happened in the past. Getting what I'm saying? The trouble is that the challenges in life, whether they are feelings inside of us we'd rather not have, conflicts with people, or problems in the world, they don't go away when we ignore them. In fact, they generally get bigger. While it isn't easy to bring ourselves face to face with pain and difficulty, there is a huge benefit to doing so. Wait a minute, what's this guy talking about? A benefit from looking straight on at suffering? I don't want to look at suffering, I want to get rid of it. He's saying the opposite. Once we've stopped denying, avoiding, or ignoring our problems, we can work to make things better. Viewing the world with compassion allows us to relinquish the need to judge and shame ourselves or other people for having entirely human feelings. Instead, we can learn to balance our emotions so we will be at our best. Our confidence grows as we learn that we can face, tolerate, and work to improve difficult emotions and situations. This confidence helps us relate to life on its own terms without being crippled by fear and worry. And I'd say without being crippled by anger and resentment too. It allows us to shift from an anxious vigilance that is continually keeping watch for potential mistakes or difficulties to a more open, balanced experience that helps us respond to challenges while savoring the good things in life and being grateful for them. Okay? So saying that we have a choice whether to be angry, whether to fall into self-pity, or whether to have compassion when confronted by misery, be that our own misery or other beings' misery. Okay? So Russell, my co-author here, is saying that he developed a compassion-focused therapy group at a state prison. He was at Airway Heights, just around, not too far from Spokane. This program is designed to help the men there learn compassionate ways of working with their anger. Many of them enter the group skeptically, thinking that compassion means being weak and vulnerable, just being nice all the time. This is the big misconception about compassion. That compassion means you're a wimp. Oh, I'm so compassionate. I forgive you. I'm so nice to you. And so very often compassion is perceived as weakness. Actually, it's anything but weakness. But you go into prison, this is very often what the guys think. Yeah. Okay. But their view of compassion changes dramatically over the course of group therapy as they discover that compassion requires courage. Okay. The courage to bring ourselves face to face with the difficulties of life and the powerful emotions that sometimes arise within us. It requires courage and commitment to stay, to tolerate the distress and the discomfort we feel when encountering these difficulties as we learn to work with them. Compassion is anything but weakness. It really takes inner strength to face things. Much easier to go get, a half-gallon of ice cream or a chocolate sundae or, a glass of whiskey or a joint or, much easier to go get something like that and self-medicate. Yeah, what's the whole opioid epidemic in the country about? Yeah, it's about self-medicating. Yeah, not wanting to look at the suffering and yet look at the incredible suffering the opioid, what a funny word, opioid epidemic is causing. Yeah, yeah. Not only to the people who are junkies, but their family members, to all of society. Yeah. I was reading that, people now they're shooting up on buses. There was a video online of somebody shooting up on a city bus. I think that probably causes distress to most of the other people on the bus. Yeah? Not to mention the person shooting up, not to mention their family. Yeah? So whether you're shooting up or popping pills, it becomes the same thing, yeah? And it's, yeah. Do you know that opioid overdose is the leading cause of death in this country for people under 50? More than car accidents, more than, all sorts of other things. There are more benefits to compassion. Recognizing we're all in this together, we stop finger pointing or sticking our heads in the sand and begin to support one another. That's really true, isn't it? When we realize that we're all in this together, what's the use of blaming other people? What's the use of ignoring other people? Yeah. So we need to help each other. Actually, I was reading something. You guys will know the name better than I, but some guy just got inducted to the Football Hall of Fame, and he made his speech, and he was saying, how people, like on a team, people really need to come together, and you get to know your teammates, their strengths and their weaknesses, and so you learn to help them, you learn to support them, you learn to work together for a common goal. Okay? So he was using a football team as an example, but referring to all of society. Yeah? So it's the same idea that's being expressed here. Okay? We're all in it together. Let's think of helping and supporting each other instead of competing and, getting in each other's ways. All our lives are filled with challenges, and we all sometimes struggle with powerful emotions. We're better able to face these challenges when we encourage one another and kindly hold ourselves accountable when we're the ones causing the problems. Holding ourselves accountable with kindness, okay, rather than blaming others. When we feel safe, accepted, and valued, we are able to face problems in life and take responsibility for them. So that's true. When we feel safe, accepted, and valued, we can accept things much easier. But then the question is, how do we come to feel safe, accepted, and valued? Are we depending on outside people, outside situations, to make us safe and accepted and valued? Or can we make ourselves safe, accept ourselves and value ourselves. Because I think that's the real cure. I don't know about you, but when I don't feel good about myself, the whole world could praise me, and maybe I get a rush of like, oh, all these people think I'm good, but as soon as I'm alone again, I don't feel good about myself. Yeah. So it's not really the external praise and love and so on that I need. What I need is some self-acceptance and some kindness and tolerance towards myself. Yeah, instead of this very harsh, critical mind. Sometimes what I do before I go to sleep is I think of the children in the world who, and adults too, yeah, who don't feel safe, who are concerned that, the person sleeping in the same room with them is going to die, that a bomb might fall on top of their house, that the next day insurgents are going to come and shoot them, that they're not going to have enough food or water. And I think, they're going to sleep or trying to go to sleep, but they don't feel safe. And so then what I do is I wish them, may they feel safe. And I call up in myself the feeling of being safe. Yeah. Can you identify in yourself the feeling when you feel safe? Yeah. It could be emotionally safe or physically safe, but there's a certain kind of feeling, anyway, that we can get in touch with inside of ourselves, that when we feel safe. So I create that feeling, or I call up that feeling, I remember what it's like, and then I say, may all these other people, wherever they are, have that feeling of safety as they go to sleep this evening, or as they wake up this morning in other parts of the world. Yeah? And I find that very effective. I don't know how much it helps them. I hope it does, but it also helps me a lot. Okay. This is the gift. Yeah, when we feel safe, accepted, and valued, we are able to face problems in life and take responsibility for them. This is a gift we can give to others and to ourselves. It's a gift that benefits the giver as much as the recipient. And that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama always says that when he shows compassion to somebody, he feels that he's getting the most out of the situation, not the person he's showing compassion to. Because he says he can't control the response of the person that he shows kindness to. We often, we try and be kind, people misunderstand it and get angry at us. We can't control their response. But he says, if I'm acting with kindness, if I'm acting with compassion, then that is the benefit, that is the quote reward in and of itself, not how the other people respond. Okay? So that gives us a lot of power. Yeah? If we can train our mind to always, or at least as much as we can, act with kindness, act with compassion, yeah, we're the person that benefits most of all. Yeah. Okay, now here's a little reflection that comes with the chapter. It's called 3 Students and 3 Teachers. Imagine 3 children attempting to learn a difficult new task, such as playing an instrument or solving an algebra problem. All 3 struggle with the task. One child has a teacher who ignores her, oblivious to her struggles. Another has an impatient teacher who constantly points out what he's doing wrong and criticizes his mistakes. The third has a compassionate teacher who gently coaches her, letting her know that this is difficult in the beginning, encouraging her to keep at it and pointing out her progress. Which child will make the best progress? Yeah. Which teacher would you prefer to have? The one that ignores you, the one that criticizes you, or the one that is compassionate and encouraging? Okay. So we can see, just by that simple example, the benefits of compassion. And that encourages us that we act with compassion. So this story isn't about, oh, well, all my life I've had teachers that ignored me, and if they didn't ignore me, my teachers always blame me. So when are these good, kind, compassionate teachers going to come along? That's not the point of this story. The point of this story is, how can I be one of these kind, compassionate, encouraging teachers to others? And how can I be kind and compassionate and encouraging to myself? And get off my own back. Because sometimes the way we talk to ourselves is even worse than what we say to other people. So how can we cut ourselves some slack and give ourselves some kindness and encouragement? So it goes all the way around, an attitude towards ourselves and an attitude towards others. So this is very different than theistic religions. In theistic religions, basically, the message is, unless you are suffering, you can't be truly compassionate. Okay? In other words, if you get any happiness out of what you're doing, it's selfish. It's not really compassionate. So compassion should make you miserable. Witness Jesus hanging on the cross. That's what you have to do to be compassionate. You have to suffer. Buddhism doesn't approach compassion that way. Like I was just saying, compassion benefits the person who's compassionate even more than it benefits the person we're compassionate towards. So if you derive an inner feeling of peace and satisfaction from compassion, fantastic. That doesn't mean you're being selfish. Okay? Why not feel happy when you can be compassionate? Why not feel happy when you can connect to somebody else at heart level? So if you have buried somewhere in your mind this idea that to be compassionate you have to suffer, pull that out like it's the weeds in your garden and throw it away. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for questions and maybe answers, and also your comments.
I read in a Buddhist book, Words of My Perfect Teacher, about a story of a student who was crying all the time, and his teacher heard about this and said, "Oh, his practice must be going very well."
Practice what?
Practicing compassion, I guess.
Yeah.
Crying for sentient beings is how I took it.
Uh-huh.
So I was wondering if you could speak to that. And I think that gave me a false understanding of compassion, that I would have to suffer to be compassionate.
Yeah. I think what I've discovered is that the stories in the books, we often we interpret them in a way that in Tibetan culture they interpret them differently. Okay, so the point of that kind of story of somebody who's always weeping over the suffering of others is not that we should suffer and go around crying all the time. Okay, it's the point of it is to show that we feel others suffering. We're not just skipping over it. We're not sticking our head in the sand. We're not saying, oh, you're suffering, just forget about it. Yeah, you're not important. You know? So the purpose of the story is to say that we're taking somebody else's suffering seriously as something worthy of attention, something worthy to care about. The point of the story is not that we feel so overwhelmed by others' suffering that all we do is cry and we can't even function ourselves. That's not the point. Okay? Yeah. It's good when, to bring things like this up, because otherwise, often we can go through years misunderstanding things. So it's very important to, when we read something, to ask about it.
Adding on to the compassion for others, I think one thing something I read recently too that I hadn't really been aware of is the effects that compassion for others can have beyond the immediate person that you're showing compassion to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not your goal going in, but having compassion for others and just the way that you treat them, your attitude, can change the reactions they have further on down the line to other people that you don't even see, and I think that's pretty amazing as well.
Yeah. Compassion definitely has a ripple effect. In the same way, the story of the guy who had a bad day at work and comes home and, beat his wife, who beat the kids, who kicked the dog, So suffering can have that ripple effect, but compassion can too. Yeah. And it does affect, as you go out. And I've had people, who really are meditating on compassion and trying to practice, tell me that their whole situation at work has changed. And that with the people, all their colleagues, what used to be a very fractious situation has become a pleasant one now. So the whole thing is, when we change ourselves, then everybody around us, it influences everybody around us. Yeah. So especially in a family too, I think this is important. In families, we know how to push other people's buttons. We know what they're sensitive about. We know what to say to hurt them. Yeah. And so that's why often at family dinners, everybody gets into their old role. And one family dinner is just like the previous one, with this person making snide remarks to that one, and that one, excusing themselves because they're hurt, and this one blaming that one, and but that one excusing themselves and putting the blame on someone else. I mean, family dynamics, yeah? But if one person in that family changes and starts to be kind and doesn't react to some of the hooks or that are thrown out, then everybody else in the family has to change too. Yeah. For a while they keep throwing out the same hooks. But if there's nobody biting them, then they don't get the rush, and, they have to change themselves. So many ripple effects.
I just wonder if you or Russell had any stories about how to bring this type of a mental approach up to people who are suffering from depression.
Okay. So how to bring it to people who are suffering from depression. I think it depends on what kind of depression they have. Yeah. Some depression comes from chemical imbalances, and that needs to be treated with meds first before you can bring in this kind of perspective. Yeah. So I'm not a psychologist. I can't really speak to that. I'll throw a few ideas out, and then I'll turn it over to Venerable Jigme. I'm glad you're smiling. And but, I think so much just involves changing our perspective. And I know for myself, depression had I had a very real perspective on life. Yeah. Which the foundation was, nobody loves me the way I want to be loved. And then you build on that. And you can build a lot on that. Okay? But once I began to see, okay, that depression is based on that thing. And I started to really see, well, wait a minute, there are people who care about me. And also to see that maybe I'm a little bit judgmental of other people. Yeah? That I have a particular way I want them to love me, and if it doesn't measure up to what I want, their love is insufficient, so that I say they don't love me. That all of that is coming from me. It's not really coming from them. And that part of the problem is I need to love myself. Not because I'm the most wonderful person in the world, but simply because I exist. And everybody who exists has some potential. So, for me, dismantling a lot of the conceptualization that lay at the basis of the depression was, really, really helpful. Okay? But it depends on the person. Some people cannot see, they're so anchored into the view that it's due to what other people did to me that it's hard for them to change their view. Yeah, but I think that that's kind of what it necessitates.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I think what you said is, if a person is clinically depressed, is what she just said, then I think to have some medicine help so that a person can start opening their perspective. Yeah. And then it kind of depends on the person and what's going to help them get in touch with their own kind heart. And sometimes it's somebody else relating to them with kindness, and that opens. Other times it's working with them about their misconceptions of how they're seeing others and themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember one time listening to a talk His Holiness gave at a church in San Francisco many years ago. This was after he learned about Westerners having such low self-esteem. And he started talking about compassion being an antidote to low self-esteem. And I remember listening to that, going, because our standard thing is, if, you don't love yourself, you can't love others. But His Holiness was saying, have compassion for others, and then that'll help you to have compassion for others. So this was the opposite of what people were saying in the West. So I was going, what's he saying? But, when your teacher says something that you don't understand or disagree with, because that person's your teacher, you think it over a little bit more. Yeah, and when I did, I began to see, okay, when I have low self-esteem, yeah, then all my thoughts are circling around how bad I am. And everything that happens gets interpreted from the perspective of how incompetent, bad, unworthy, whatever it is I am. Whereas when we have compassion, compassion pulls us out of ourselves. Yeah? So all this rumination about me can't continue when compassion is manifested in the mind. Because they're opposite mental factors. Yeah? So when you really have compassion and look towards other people's situation and tune in to what's going on with them and wish them well, then you yourself lighten up, at least because you don't have the same amount of time to sit there and ruminate about your own pain. And I began to see that, that's what His Holiness is talking about. And so that's why, Mother Teresa says, like, when I feel low, give me somebody to help. Because that pulls us out of me, I'm insufficient, I'm unworthy, nobody loves me, my world is falling apart, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? And then when you start acting towards others with kindness, then you yourself feel so much better. So then so much of that negative self-talk stops because you feel better about yourself. Yeah. But it is true that receiving kindness from others does help us get in touch with that. Yeah. But we can't wait until somebody else is kind to us. We have to act on our own. And then if somebody's kind to us, great, that's even better.
Sometimes people can be kind to us, all the kindness in the world, and we still don't get it. That's also true.
Yep. It's very true.